Shatru Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste and welcome to the first class of the last chapter of a text that is called Panchadashi. Panchadashi means 15-chaptered one, and it's a feminine noun with a feminine suffix, a common feminine suffix, the same that we talked about yesterday in the Sanskrit class, bhutihi, like that. So that same long, ni thing, there are 2 or 3 feminine suffixes. So this is one of them. And then we have it is feminine because all knowledge is feminine. That is why it is feminine. In fact, everything that is worthy of pursuit is feminine. Everybody rushes after money, correct? Lakshmi, feminine. And those who say, no, I'm not into worldly things, what do I want? If you don't want worldly things, what do you want?
Otherworldly.
Yeah, such as? What do you want? Knowledge. You want, knowledge, that is feminine. And the thing that gives the knowledge, the Shruti, the text is also feminine. So therefore, Panchadashi is feminine. And even Bhagavad Gita, actually there is no such word called the Gita in the Sanskrit language. There is no such word at all. It is Gitam, neuter. But because it is giving this knowledge, we artificially make this a feminine noun and we call it the song of the Lord. Bhagavad Gita, we make it feminine. And therefore we say Ashtadashadhyayini, the one who has 18 limbs, meaning each limb of this goddess of knowledge is a chapter. So this is something to really look into and see the importance of why all the works of Vedanta, are really have feminine names, and the reason is because knowledge is considered feminine. And so here we have the Panchadashi, and the Panchadashi is written by a very erudite Shankaracharya, and Shankaracharya is not the original one of the descendants, because before the first Shankaracharya known as Adi Shankara, Adi means the one who comes first. Yeah. The first one, before he gave up his body, he established 4 centers of learning called Mathas, means a center of learning, in the north, south, east and west, and appointed his 4 students, he appointed for keeping the tradition, for disseminating whatever knowledge, and to be like the guiding posts for people who sought this teaching. And one such Pitha is in the town of Sringeri in Karnataka, a very important seat. And now actually you will find that there are no longer just 4 seats of Shankaracharya. There are not 4 seats at all. How many are there? You can't even count how many there are. That many seats are there. And why? Because whatever would happen, like for example in the olden times, the Shankaracharya would go traveling, and in those days when you go traveling, it's not like, sitting here and going on orbits and booking a ticket. Okay, I'm going traveling. Those days everything is, by foot. And then, and then there are no highways, roadways and wonderful trails which the park department, state park departments, prune and keep it free of snakes and things. And even though the state park departments are active, still we hear, somebody was rescued and somebody was, eaten, mauled by a bear, and all these things we hear. People who go off on trails alone. And so you see, even today we are under the grip of the elements. What to talk of then, when all these GPS and all and maps were not there. And so the Shankaracharya would go, and let's say he failed to return, then for a certain stipulated time, and then the successor, who was already appointed as the successor, would take the seat and declare himself to be Shankaracharya, the next one. Because if you are absent for a certain time, you are presumed, in case of sadhus we don't say dead, Mahasamadhi, you have presumed to have taken Mahasamadhi thanks to a lion or a tiger or a bear, or some mishap, lightning, anything could happen. And then so the new Shankaracharya would say, okay, I am the designated successor and I have climbed onto the throne and I am here. Many times what would happen, that the other Shankaracharya, who was presumed to have undergone Mahasamadhi, was not in Samadhi at all, was alive and well. Well then, what to do? And so, unbeknownst to them, because there was no SMS in those days, he would slowly he was delayed because of so many things. There was a landslide or something, so he was delayed. And so he would slowly make his way back to the Peetha, little knowing that the student has already sat himself down on the Gaddi. Gaddi means what? The seat. Yeah. And so, but the villagers talk, and he goes from village to village, and in one of the villages where he stops for a night of shelter and some bhiksha under the tree, then the villagers inform him, oh, you've come back, but guess what? Your seat has been taken by your student. And the sadhu dharma means the way of life, is to not cause any disruption. So you don't even go there and enter the village and glare on the successor. What do you mean? You couldn't even wait some extra days? You've already usurped this thing. Get clear out the throne. I'm back. That is not the way. Because this is not an emperorship. This is a sadhu life. You're first a sadhu, and then you happen to be in the post of Shankaracharya established by Adi Shankara. So then what that person would do is just continue to stay in that village itself, and much to the delight of the villagers, and a new Peetha would emerge like that. So there would be the original one, and there would be this one too. And so like this, there are many Shankaracharyas, some of which we have not even heard of. And so anyhow, so this is something that happened because of the way this happened. So one such Peetha, as I said, is the Sringeri. And in Sringeri, one of the Shankaracharyas in the tradition in medieval times in India was known as Swami Vidyaranya, and who is the author of this and many other erudite works on Vedanta. Another famous book that he has written is called Jivan Mukti Viveka. He was a very great scholar and a excellent statesperson. In fact, the reigning kings, the reigning king had completely surrendered to this teacher as the teacher, and placed the teacher's sandals on the throne. And in fact, this Swami was a great statescraftsman, and he basically ran the kingdom from behind. I mean, not that he, the king was the king, but he was the real king, and he advised the king what to do, and those times saw a great renaissance in the tradition, in the culture. Everything flowered, and this empire is known for its peace and prosperity. It's just wonderful. It's seen as a very wonderful time. And so this was Swami Vidyaranya. And in the other work also, which is very beautiful, Jivan Mukti Viveka, he talks about he criticizes the whole view that moksha is something to be attained after death. He shows how it is possible to have moksha here and now, not because moksha is something, primarily because moksha is not something to be gained in time, it is already you, and that self-discovery has to happen when one is embodied itself. So he shows all that, and he talks about various forms of renunciation and the connection between renunciation and moksha. All these things he talks about in this book. Very erudite scholar. And so the Panchadashi is another, a magnum opus, so to speak. In 15 chapters, he has a wonderful grasp of all the Upanishads and a very versatile way. And we'll see that even in this chapter that we are about to study. He has not only a wonderful grasp of the Upanishad, but a very versatile way of restating what the Upanishad says and putting it into verse. That's not easy to do. You can get to the level perhaps of appreciating what the Upanishad says. You can say, oh, this is wonderful. But then restating that in a meter, and he does that constantly. And that is his forte, the way he explains it. And usually what he does is take one set of Upanishadic statements that come in the original teachings, in the what are called the Shruti, and then he elaborates on that throughout the chapter. And that constitutes one chapter. So you have a pratigna, a thesis statement at the beginning, what he is going to elaborate on, and the rest of the chapter elaborates and explains all this very thoroughly. And so sometimes the statement is such that you need is so terse that you need about 300 verses to explain that one verse. Atmanam ched vijaniyat ayamasti iti purushah kimartham kasya kamaya shariram anusanjvaret. This is a verbatim, almost verbatim Shruti Vakya taken from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which says if one knows the Atma, if one knows oneself, that I am this, if one knows completely without a shadow of doubt or vagueness, if one knows this, then for what reason and for what purpose will the person identify with the body, mind, sense complex? This is a very complex statement, and so therefore the 7th chapter elucidates this one statement from the Upanishad in 296 verses. That's a lot. So this is his forte. And the other thing that Vidyaranya is known for is his sharp, arguments, because the learning takes place through a lot of back and forth. And there are two kinds of back and forths we have to consider in the process of the learning. One is what is called the samvada type of back and forth. Samvada means what?
Which you said it's all being given.
Huh?
Well spoken.
Very, very nice. Yeah. I'm glad Sanskrit is coming. Samvada means well spoken, correct. Okay? But it's got a specific meaning in this context. What is it that is well spoken? A special kind of a dialogue between the teacher and the student. That's the only thing that is well spoken. Vada, just speech, like between equals. Samvada, a special form of a dialogue that takes place between the teacher and the student. That's why the word sam comes, And then we have, what is that? Jalpa, which is an interfaith dialogue. Everybody comes, stands on the podium and says whatever they want, and everybody goes home without being impacted in the least bit. Yeah. Then we have something even worse than that called vitanda. Vitanda means anything that you say is wrong because you happen to say it. Horrible. So we have a friendly kind of a dialogue, which is samvada between the teacher and the student, and that also is already part and parcel of the style of Vidyaranya, Swami Vidyaranya's teaching. That is also part and parcel of that particular style of Vidyaranya Swami's teaching, because the samvada is already happening because he himself gives examples, he himself shows certain ways of connecting two things together, etc. So that samvada is already happening to a certain nameless bunch of students, where he as the teacher elucidates. And sometimes he takes the story of the teaching between the student and the teacher from the Upanishad and expounds on that. So in that way Samvada is there. But then the other kind of arguments are also important, which is what? The non-Vedantic arguments. The people who say this is a huge waste of time. Why are you all signed online on a wonderful day? Why are you all sitting here? This is a colossal waste of time, and you should just be going to the mall and the movies and and thinking of how else to enjoy life next. What are you going to gain from this? This is what are you doing? Why are you here? Because these are the voices that are there, not just in society. Because I'm sure in your own family people say this. What are you doing? You're signing on from India at 4 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. You're signing on at 3 o'clock in the morning. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? And so, are you mad? This is sometimes people say this. Why are you, what has happened to you? Why do you think this is important? So this kind of a thought on behalf of people who don't value this knowledge is a predominant what is called Purva Paksha in the society. Purva Paksha means an oppositional, an oppositional argument. So Purva Paksha. And so this kind of a Purva Paksha is very much prevalent in the society. But guess where else it is prevalent? In the society, in inner society, here. Because why do those statements made by other people bother you? They bother because, as we say in America, you spot it, you got it. Yeah, that's all it is. So if other people, if you're being affected by something somebody said out there, let's say somebody said this is a terrible waste of time, stop doing this. If somebody says that, then why is it bothering you? That is, they are entitled to their opinion. Give them the freedom to be who they are and move on, You do what you want. Because you are not bothering them by studying. And so if they are bothered, namaha, you can move on. But if you are also bothered, that means there is a shadow side of that thought has already been internalized by you. So the Purva Paksha, in the form of the oppositional arguments by certain philosophers which have names, philosophies which have names like Nyaya, logic, the quintessential logician who is all the time wanting to establish everything through logic. When do you need logic? Logic means inference. When do you need inference? When something is not available for direct perception, correct? Yeah, then that's when you need inference. You wake up, the roads are wet, and what do you infer? Logically? Must have rained. You didn't see it rain. So obviously the rain, the event of the rain was not available to you for direct perception. You were sleeping at that time. So when you wake up and go to the window, you see all the roads are wet and you conclude it has rained. But if you had seen the rain, let us say you were up at night, you heard the rain and you saw the rain, and then do you still need logic to conclude that it had rained? No. But the logician here, in the, the Nyaya Shastra is a, what's its name? It should be a complement, a complement to our understanding of the Shastra. We are not opposed to logic. So we need a kind of logic that is Shruti Anukula Nyaya, also called Yukti. Shruti Anukula Yukti, which means a logic that goes along with and does not defy the statements of the Shruti, the original texts that give the knowledge. Because the original text we have to see as telling us something that is hitam, that is comforting to us. And so that view that whatever the Shruti is telling is good for me, that view is called an attitude of Shraddha. A trust that this is not going to lead me down the wrong road. Otherwise, why would I study it? So that trust is called Shraddha. Because it is a revealed text, we give it the benefit of doubt. And so we do use logic to assimilate the teaching, to assimilate what the Shruti says. We can use logic. Like we use logic all the time. Are you there in sleep? Yes. Are you there in dream? Yes. Are you there in the waking state? Yes. So we use all kinds of logic. And but we don't use logic that goes against the Shruti. Now the Nyaya system of philosophy, for example, it does not take the Shruti as a paramount means of knowledge. Logic becomes the paramount mode of understanding. And so the Shruti is kind of squeezed into whatever logic that it fits into. It's the opposite way. And so Swami Vidyaranya has a very good way of dealing with these logicians and dealing with what are called the Vaisheshikas. Vaisheshikas are certain kinds of materialists who posit a whole lot of arguments and make things very, very complicated. And their argument, will range from, they are very much hand in hand with the logicians. Plus they have a few extra things. Their argument is all about the non-being of things. They are very interested in how something is not and then something is, and how from the is not it became is. Now this is really backwards. We don't say there is anything that is not. Even when you say is not, the first word in is not is what?
Yes.
Is. So that is can never be denied. Even when you say is not, we are only talking of a particular thing, a particular name and form at a particular time. This we have to understand. This is very fascinating. So then there are the Charvakas, another a kind of a static materialists who say that all that is here is what you see. They only believe in the means of knowledge called the eyes, ears, the direct perception. They don't even go as far as logic. There is no connection between cause and consequence, effect, nothing. They just say, loot, plunder, pillage, but make sure you have a good time. Because who is going to come back? You are as good as the body. Yeah. Charu vak yasya. The ones whose speech is beautiful. So very sweet talk they have, and they lead you to believe that this Vedanta is a huge waste of time. So in the time of Adi Shankara, these kinds of philosophies, the Sankhyas, the Vaisheshikas, the Nayayikas, the Charvakas, the Bauddhas, all these philosophies were the prevalent, what is called Purva Paksha. In the time of Adi Shankara and in the time of Swami Vidyaranya also. So they were the prevalent Purva Paksha, they were the prevalent oppositional arguments and people who represented those arguments. And they have a few things to say. It's not that they are completely useless, but they are just, points of view which are not of much use if you mistake that for the view. A view is, a point of view is perfectly valid. If you know the view, you can appreciate the point of view. But if you mistake the point of view for the entire view, then, you are in trouble. So these oppositional arguments have also, it's not just student asking questions with respectfully and saying, I don't understand this. These are people who already have certain ideas of how things ought to be, and that Vedanta is against their idea, so they oppose that particular thought, or there is some vagueness or error in their thinking. So Swami Vidyaranya has a very beautiful way of dispensing with these people, In the whole of the Panchadashi, you can see that very beautifully. First, he puts an elaborate snare for them. Like in the forest, if you want to catch some birds in the olden times, what they would do is put a net. And then on the net, you would just put some dirt, leaves, and a lot of bird food, seeds, everything. And then the net would have a string, which is also covered by the mud. And then the bird catcher is sitting behind the tree or on the tree with the string in the hand. So all the birds would come and flock because there's a lot of bird seed there. And then, not knowing that, they would all come, and then at the correct time he would pull the string and they would all be trapped in the net, unfortunately. So Vidyaranya's way is to first, prepare the ground by inviting them into this snare, and then they get entangled in the force of their own wrong arguments, and then they are dispensed with and dispatched with, so that these distractions, this distracted way of thinking, which will take us away from the purport of the Vedanta Shastra, are not entertained. This is the reason why they are dispatched with completely, and Swami Vidyaranya has a lot of wit in doing this. And also from the Panchadashi, we come to know of a number of stories and arguments and a number of examples which he gives. Some are very, very classic examples which are so beautiful, like the dog, and an example that is pertinent to the 15th chapter is the example of the dog and the bone. Correct? Yeah, I've told you that story before. And the dog finds a dry bone somewhere on the road, and then sits down under a tree to enjoy it, and the more it bites on the bone, the sharp edges of the bone scratch the gums of the dog and cause blood to be drawn, and the dog just slurps up the blood and says, "What a juicy bone." So this is a classic aropa, a superimposition of the juice. The juice belongs to the dog, not to the bone. But the dog makes that mistake and superimposes the juice onto this bone. And what is this a metaphor of? Exactly what one does in life. So wherever there is joy, wherever there is happiness, whenever there is happiness, one ascribes it to the object, forgetting completely that joy is experienced not because of the object, but because of the very subject. So like this, there are many such examples he gives, and he drives home the truth of the whole vision. And in fact, the Panchadashi contains everything possible. It starts by talking about the 5 elements. It starts by talking about the, what is Ishvara's Srishti. Srishti means creation. And what is Jiva's creation. We have done this chapter before, chapter 4, a long time ago. And some of you are nodding, so I think, I'm very happy that people other than myself remember. I always get happy when that is the case. So in chapter 4, it's a very beautiful chapter. He talks about the Ishvara, the whole Jagat, the universe is Ishvara's projection, which is lovely to think about the universe that way. It is a projection, that arises from, is sustained by, and goes back to Bhagavan, this universe. And the Jiva, not to be outdone, has its own projection. Yeah. And if Ishvara, projects the Jagat, Jiva projects what? Confusion, ignorance, mistaken identity, and feeling of helplessness, fear and sorrow. This is what is Jiva's projection. Jiva's projection is called Mithya within Mithya. Ishvara's projection is the first Mithya, and this is Mithya within Mithya. And this is so humorously talked about in chapter 4. It's really something to study some other time. It's very, very nice. So like this, the whole thing proceeds very beautifully. And, and so the entire work is divided into 3 quintads of 5 chapters each. The first quintad is called Viveka. Viveka means what? Discrimination. Discrimination between Jiva's Srishti and Ishvara's Srishti. That comes under this thing, Viveka. And then Tattva Viveka, discrimination between the 5 elements, like what is the cause of what, and discrimination, so all these things. So there is a certain kind of a sifting thing happening in the first quintad, which is setting the stage for the teaching to flow. and and a lot of basic concepts such as sattva, rajas, tamas, and such as Ishvara, Jiva, and what is Ishvara, what is Jiva, what are the 5 elements, are all to be found in the first quintad. Then there is the middle quintad, which is called Deepa. Deepa means what? Light. And so we can safely say that this concerns quote unquote enlightenment. That's why everything, Tripti Deepa, Nataka Deepa, all these things are there. Kutastha Deepa, we have done the 8th chapter also, Kutastha Deepa. So all this is there in the middle quintad, which repeatedly iterates the vision. What is this vision of Vedanta? How come this oneness is there despite the apparent differences? So the apparent differences are dismissed because they are apparent, and the real identity between oneself and Ishvara and Bhagavan is established here. And then the result of this vision is described in the last quintad, which ends in every chapter has the word Ananda in it. Ananda means joy. Actually it means limitlessness, but since that limitlessness causes one to be joyful, it is called joy. And so this Ananda is the last chapter. Why? Because the outcome of this knowledge is what? Limitlessness. Is understanding this limitlessness. And so this way there are these very beautifully organized chapters. It's a marathon work. It's a wonderful work, and there are some things which will be pointed out here also in the 15th chapter, which summarizes the entire texts. And so we are studying the 15th chapter here, and the 15th chapter, very interestingly, the Panchadashi is closing with the 15th chapter, which is entitled Vishayananda. Vishaya means objects. Ananda, the joy derived from objects. What a strange title for a work which is talking about the subject rather than the object. Correct? What a strange and a very intriguing title, one might say. Because if Vedanta is, always beating one on the head, focus on the subject, forget the objects. The object resolves into the subject. And that which never resolves is what? The subject. The subject cannot and does not resolve into the object. The object comes to light because of the subject, which is the consciousness, because it becomes evident to the subject. And the subject is self-evident. So the object resolves into the I. The subject, does not resolve, is not subject to resolution. This we have studied how many times? This is Vedanta 101. This is where we begin, this is where we end. And suddenly Swami Vidyaranya in the last chapter, he just, makes it very intriguing by entitling this chapter, what? Vishayananda. Brahmanande Vishayananda. So this the joy or the delight derived from contact with or encounter or a rendezvous with objects. A very difficult, thing, because here it seems contrary to Vedanta that we have a whole chapter on this joy that one encounters while contacting or being in association with various objects. However, a deeper look at this chapter shows us that it is an extremely pertinent thing to have done, because there is a rampant feeling, even in the modern Vedantic, paperback Vedantic works that we encounter, that the study of Vedanta leads to a thing called bliss. And this bliss is often used in the capital B, Sometimes they will use bold and underline also if they could. Capital B for bliss. A for Ananda, and what is the translation? B for bliss. And this bliss seems to be so elusive. Number one, there are many things about this bliss we have to talk about. Number one, this bliss seems to be very elusive. Number two, this bliss seems to be experiential. And the Vedanta teachers themselves will say, this is not something to know. This is not something to know. If you study, okay, this is bliss. Is that the same? It's like a recipe. You read the recipe. And then is your hunger, satiated? No. Unless you eat the recipe book. That's a different thing. Unless you literally assimilate the book. Because you don't have time to cook, Too many classes, that's why. So therefore what? Therefore, you have to either assimilate the recipe book, or after learning the recipe, you have to go purchase the ingredients, cut, chop, dice, whatever you do, cook and put the masalas, and then you can sit down and eat, correct? And this is often the example given by modern Vedantins, saying that this so-called bliss, which is extremely secret, which is extremely elusive, and this bliss of Brahman is very different from the everyday chota bliss. Chota means small. Yeah, these small blisses that you have, what is that, little ice cream bliss, big deal, little, whatever, chocolate bliss, ice cream bliss, mango bliss, what is this, this is nothing. We want the big bliss, the capital B. And then they make it extremely mystic. This is another problem. They say it has to be experienced. Because how can you know? Do you know what is sweet? You can read, okay, the sugar crystal is this, this is the composition of the sugar crystal. But then do you know the sweet taste by doing a chemical analysis of the sugar crystal? And they sound very convincing when they say that. The answer, of course, is no. And so too, in the same manner, this bliss has to be experienced. What else to say, Now, this is the Purva Paksha, okay? This is our modern Purva Paksha, and in fact it was there even before. This is the oppositional argument that we have to contend with whenever we study Vedanta, and a residue of which is already there in our own brains, thinking that I have to experience Brahman. Who says that? Brahman says that. When does Brahman say that? While experiencing Brahman, Brahman says that. So, this is something obviously that needs a certain correction. And from Vidyaranya's chapter focusing on Vishayananda, we see that this Purva Paksha is a long-standing Purva Paksha that has been there for many centuries, like cockroaches. Yeah. Cockroach, very ancient. Yeah. Ancient survivors. Nothing happens. You put it under water, it will survive. You take away all the air, it will survive somehow. Put it in a container, it will survive. So like this, like the cockroach, this pervasive belief that the study of Brahman is going to produce a kind of a bliss that is experiential, and it is a sudden burst of bliss which is unending and which can only be experienced and cannot be talked about, is a abiding and pervasive belief in the Vedantic thought. And like the cockroach, it is an unsanitary belief. A belief that has no place in our understanding. A belief, if we keep on nurturing, will lead us the wrong road, will lead us down the road of disaster in the assimilation of knowledge. And therefore the 15th chapter comes as a powerful intervention to to show that there is only one source of bliss. Whether we are talking of subject or the object, it doesn't matter. Everything is really, we are talking of the subject, and the subject that is never subject to obfuscation, never subject to becoming an object, never subject to becoming invisible. That is the nature of the I. So then the experiential bliss, if there is such a thing, which is attached to certain objects, is what? Is finite necessarily, because every experience is that which comes and goes. That's why it's called experience. If it is there all the time, why will you call it experience? You won't call it experience. So the experience itself is finite. We are talking about revealing the nature of the experiencer, who is infinite, who is limitless. So when we use the word bliss, there is also one ice cream in these parts you can get. What is that called?
Coconut bliss.
Coconut bliss. See, this is what I'm saying. So, you start the day by saying, first I'll have coconut bliss because summer is here. Then after that I'll have Brahman bliss. What is this? You're just replacing the word coconut with Brahman. This is what I'm saying. So, therefore, we can't, first of all, to call it bliss with a capital B, which is outside the scope of one's experience, brings a lot of problems into our study. The first problem, and also Swami Vidyaranya will deal with it later, I'm just doing a broad summary today. And the first problem is that, why would you want that Brahman bliss? If it is so difficult to achieve, then why are you wanting that? And if it is completely different from everything that you know and everything that you've experienced already, how do you know you want that? Can you desire an unknown thing? Think about this. Can you?
Mm-hmm. Totally unknown.
If something, not like heaven. Heaven is unknown, but there is a certain hope that I will go to heaven. Why? Because nothing is going right here. So I have imagined a place after life, hereafter, that might be better, and the Shruti talks about it. So it's not entirely unknown, because the pramana for heaven, the means of knowledge for heaven, the way I come to know about heaven is through what? Is through the teachings, or any religious text talks about it, Bible talks about it, Quran talks about it. So there is such a thing called heaven. And yes, it is described in wonderful. Every heaven has got a certain description. The Christian heaven has the lion and the lamb lying down together, which is wonderful. So there is no conflict. And the lion does not gobble up the lamb, which is a nice thing. And the Quranic heaven is very green, because the religion grows in the desert. So the green is something which is very welcome. So like this. And the Vedic heaven also has certain things. Like it says that you won't have a mind that is quarrelsome, so you will not fight with anyone. So that's one of the reasons you are very happy there. So then, hearing about these things, the akanksha arises, the expectancy arises. Oh, may I go? May I go and be there? So it's not entirely unknown, correct? But let's imagine, if you can, because it's hard to even visualize this. Let us imagine, if you can, an absolutely unknown object. Can you have a desire for it? No. So too with this so-called Brahman bliss, within heavy quotes. How can one, this has to be, now we are using logic, Shruti-friendly logic. So, what are we saying here? We are saying, how can one desire something that is absolutely unknown? If the Brahman bliss, the so-called Brahman bliss, is not understood at all, has nothing to do with this chota bliss that we like, it has nothing to do with coconut bliss, then how do you know you want it? This is a very important question. You can't want something you don't know. But yet, everyone is mad after this Brahman bliss, which tells us what? first of all, that there is something which is already known about this. Correct? Yeah. Can't desire an unknown thing. Otherwise, how would you have the pursuit of happiness and the pursuit of joy as a primary pursuit in life, if you didn't know what this happiness was? So somewhere it is understood, somewhere it is known. And what do I want? I want to reproduce that which is known. This happiness, this joy, this limitlessness, that which is known, I want to reproduce it all the time. Right? Yeah. And the more I want to reproduce it, thinking that it is reproduced, it is something, it is a product. That is the first problem. The more I want to reproduce it, imagining it to be a product, the more elusive it is because it happens to be uncreated. Number one. And the more I strive to produce it through actions and through thinking that it is lying outside of myself, the more frustrated I get. Why? Because it is not other than me. I am included in this vast discussion of what this limitless is. It has to include the I. So number one, it is uncreated. Number two, it is already myself. So it is not something to be produced through action, karma, and therefore what? It is something to be discovered through knowledge. So it's a cognitive process. Number three, this so-called elusive happiness that everybody is mad after is not outside the scope, outside the realm of your daily happinesses. It's not outside the scope of coconut bliss. It's not outside the scope of mango bliss. It is not outside the scope of anything that you consider pleasant, comforting, happy. It is within the ken of that. Then if it is within the ken of that, why is it that the same object delights me one day and then makes me go into despair another day? Like a teenager, Yeah. One day, oh, so wonderful, this child of mine. Another day, am I really the mother? Am I really the father of this child? This is what happens. And so what is that makes something desirable and non-desirable in the same body, mind, sense complex? What is the parameters of something that brings out the joy and something that inhibits the joy? Has the object changed? No. Has the subject changed? No, the subject is the same. Then what is this intermediary funny thing that has changed? And Swami Vidyaranya is going to say, it is all the state of the antahkarana. What is antahkarana? Not ahankara.
The internal.
Not ahankara. Don't get confused. Antahkarana. Antahkarana.
Mind.
Yeah. Inner instrument, which is the mind. Yeah. Inner instrument. Antah, inner, karanam, instrument. So the state of the mind is actually deciding. What is it deciding? The desirability and the undesirability of various objects. And in commensurating with the desirability or otherwise of various objects is my happiness or otherwise, or the lack thereof. So the pratibandha, the inhibiting factor of not enjoying life is what? My own mind, the state of my own mind. And that is going to be explained very, very nicely. And so here that is the third thing. So the first thing is what? The joy depends upon the subject, not the object. And the subject is limitless, and the joy is therefore not an experiential joy but a Swarupa. Swarupa means an exposition, an expression of one's own nature. And one's own nature being limitless, so too the joy is limitless, is limitlessly whole. And this limitlessness is not a product to be produced by action. It is one's own nature. It is not a product at all. It is uncreated, and it is not outside of the self. This much we have seen. Now, coming to the particular, the last point, of course, one more point. And the last point was, so if this is the case, that I am already experiencing Brahman, which is nothing but joy, which is nothing but limitlessness, what is the inhibiting factor? How come I don't know it? One is the larger inhibiting factor, which is self-ignorance. And then within the self-ignorance, rubric of self-ignorance, there are various states of the mind that act as an inhibiting factor to understanding and being in touch with that limitlessness. So this is the summary of what we have talked about so far. Now, the other beauty of this chapter is that it comes a full circle to the first chapter. It's beautiful. Tattva Viveka is the first chapter. Tattva means the determination of what is real. Sat, Brahman. So the determination of what is real and what is a superimposition on that reality, what is just a projection, a mithya, what is dependent upon that reality. And so in the first chapter, all these things are talked about. What is this Brahman? Sat Chit Ananda. And what is it that how come I recognize that sometimes and do not recognize that some other times? Because of the quality of the mind. And very beautifully, in fact, some of the verses they go right in tandem. So in a way, it's a concluding chapter and it goes right back to the first chapter, making the teaching a beautiful and full circle that never really ends. Very, very beautifully done. So with these words of introduction, let us take a dip into the first verse. Athatra Vishayanandah
Athatra Vishayananda
Brahmanandam Sharupa Bhag
Brahmanandam Sharupa Bhag
Nirupyate Dvara Bhutastah
Nirupyate Dvara Bhutastah
Da Amshadvam Shrutir Jagau
Amshadvam Shrutir Jagau.
Now somewhere else I had to break it. Nirupyate Dvara Bhutah Tadamshatvam. Yeah. Athatra Vishayanandah
Athatra Vishayananda
Brahmanandam Sharupa Bhag
Brahmanandam Sharupa Bhag
Nirupyate Dvara Bhutah
Nirupyate Dvara Bhutah
Tadam Shatvam Shrutir Jagau
Tadam Shatvam Shrutir Jagau.
Atha means now. Now what? Now having finished writing the whole book, that is with the now. Atha. As you will see in the Kaivalya Upanishad, Atha has many, many meanings. Atha means 14 chapters later, Atha. So, Atha means after all these arguments have taken place and after having talked about this whole situation of whatever the purport of the Panchadashi was, then what happens? In this chapter, Atra means what? In this chapter. In this chapter called Vishayananda, in this chapter also that deals with the Ananda, the joy of Vishayas, objects, which is nothing but. And what is this Vishayananda? This Vishayananda is nothing but a part of Brahmananda. Is nothing but the joy derived out of the objects is nothing but part and parcel of the joy of the subject. Because who is deriving the joy? Subject is experiencing the joy. So, the daily experiences of joy, it is said in the first verse, are not outside of the scope of the joy of Brahman. The so-called Brahman bliss is not outside of the scope of the daily happinesses. In fact, we should not use the word bliss. I am just using it in the Purva Paksha way. Like I said, if something is unknown, it cannot be desired. But because I want to keep reproducing the daily joys, when now, how long? Forever. It is very clear that what I want is that forever, which means what? Limitlessness. And that limitlessness that I am striving for is myself alone. And all these object-related joys are included in this limitlessness. Understood? Yeah. So the object joys are not outside, cannot fall outside of the joy which happens to be the subject. And to think that otherwise, to think that the subject joy is nothing to do with the objects, is foolishness. Because how can it be then? How can I want it? If I don't know it, how can I want it? And if it's outside, is anything outside of the Jagat, outside of the self, outside of Ishvara? Nothing can be outside of Ishvara. So too, this joy of this small, chota joy that I value is nothing but an expression of the joy of Brahman alone. Nirupyate means is expounded. In the next line, Nirupyate, and Dwara Bhutaha means through the gateway. Through the gateway, Tad Amshatvam, a part of that, what the Shruti, the Veda, will say. So, in other words, this is just the translation. So, the joy of Brahman, or the limitlessness which is called Brahman, the joy connected to the I, the subject, is, is a gateway. No, the other way around. The joy connected to the objects is a gateway to understand the joy of the subject. Dwara Bhutaha. Very nice. Is a door. Because in order to get into the house, one needs to go through a doorway, correct? And the doorway has to be known. If you don't know where the door is, how do you enter the house? You can't enter the house if you don't know where the door is, correct? You keep going around and knocking on the walls and you cannot have you need a little entryway. So to enter into this so-called very, difficult concept and a highly valued concept at the same time, and a much argued and a much mistaken concept as well, called the joy of Brahman, Brahmananda, the joy of the self, the joy which is the nature of the self. Joy here is nothing but limitlessness, and more about that I will tell you. So the joy which is the nature of the subject. How do I understand that? If there is no doorway, if there is no sphere of experience in my daily life, how can I understand that? How can I want that? How can I assimilate that? How can I live that? So therefore, into this house that we want to enter, we are crafting a special doorway. And what is that doorway? through the known joys of the everyday. That becomes the doorway to understanding this so-called Brahman joy. Very nice. Because we need to enter the place. Without entering, how are you going to know? Because if there is no reference point. And so here, here we see Swami Vidyaranya's, compassion really for the human being, and also an extreme pragmatism here on part of Swami Vidyaranya, where the known joy is itself seen as part of that which I want to achieve. So there is only one joy. It has been, in this first verse so much ground has been gained already. There is only one joy. There are not two joys. This so-called, quote-unquote Brahman happiness, bliss of Brahman is not one more thing. There is only one joy, and that happens to be, you. That's all it is. But I am not there. I can't understand that. How do I understand that? All right. For those who cannot understand that, we will go through a doorway. And what is that doorway? Your everyday experiences that make you happy, and the everyday joy, which is centered on the objects, is no different from the joy centered on the subject. So it's to go back to the example of the bone and the dog. And the first you have to agree with the dog, yes, you have a very juicy bone, lucky you. Because the dog is, is not ready to give up the bone, and is not ready to understand that the juice is not coming from the bone. And so you have to say, very lucky dog, good dog, wonderful dog, and very nice bone, great. I'm happy that you are happy. You write a letter of congratulations to the dog, You don't tell the dog you are making a big error. You idiotic dog, what do you know? That is a condescending way of teaching. And Swami Vidyaranya doesn't do that. He is talking on the level at which people are. And there is a certain kind of a sphere of understanding. Because this joy of Brahman cannot be something I don't know. I know it very much. I'm living it every day. And I'm living it, especially in those times. I'm living it more consciously when I am free of sadness. And if you ask the lay person, when are you free of sadness? When happiness comes. Okay, when does happiness come? When I am surrounded by something I want and I desire. You see this? This is the thinking. And so in keeping with this thinking, Swami Vidyaranya goes. And is he doing a big mistake? Oh, maybe, Shruti doesn't say that. Shruti herself says that. Because the words of Vidyaranya, Swami, are not outside of the Shruti at all. He will always quote wonderful things, and you will see that there is a wonderful Shruti from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad that he quotes to elucidate this in the rest of this chapter. Since he quotes the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, we can help ourselves to the Taittiriya Upanishad, so we add to our understanding, where there is a delightful section called Ananda Mimamsa in the Brahmananda Valli in the second chapter of the Taittiriya Upanishad. And in this second chapter, there is a wonderful kind of a lilting set of verses that talk about the measure of happiness. What is an ideal measure? First, it's very ingeniously, the Shruti comes up with an ideal, typical measure of human happiness. Yuva syat sadhu yuvadhyayakah. Yuva syat. Yuva syat means what? A young man. Why man? Because more energy, more strength, that's all. Okay, young means Young and restless, they go together, correct? No, here is sadhu you are. He is a sadhu. Means very calm, composed. How is that possible, Who are his parents? Must be slightly dull, Must have not studied. Adhyayakah, very erudite. Oh, must not have, must be very ill-mannered. No, ashishtaha, very nicely taught. Home training has been impeccable. Oh, must be wishy-washy, a nerd. No, dradhishtaha. Oh, must be just, sitting in front of the computer all day, not strong. Balishtaha. Balishtaha means very strong. The most strong person. Now he's starting to look at like son-in-law material, And the father of the girl is already convinced. The father of the girl says, we have to go, we can't, this is a wonderful, very principled boy, a wonderful thing. This will be a great match for our daughter. The mother-in-law, the prospective mother-in-law here is much more pragmatic. She says, you always rush like this, you are always into principles. First, let's find out what is his principal worth in the bank. Then only I will say yes. I don't want, some kind of a, good-looking fellow who is strong, who is well-read, but doesn't have 2 pennies to rub together. I don't want this kind of a fellow for our daughter. Who says? Mommy says, mother-in-law says. And then, what is the next line in the Shruti? Tasyayam prithvi vittasya, tasyayam prithvi sarva vittasya purna syat. Visualize next. The Shruti says that all the resources on this beautiful earth belong to him. The gold, the diamonds, the hills, the valleys, and all the yacht and everything, the palaces, everything that is there is his. Now the mother says, yeah, okay, we can look into this alliance, no problem. What, you're sitting here drinking coffee, go, catch hold of him. Now the mother of the bride says this. So this is an ideal, typical measure, one measure of human happiness, because this is the extent to which you can go. You can have complete strength, you can enjoy the goodness, you can enjoy the wealth, you can enjoy complete health, and you can be principled. This is one measure of human happiness. Oh, can everyone get it? No, of course not. And is there anything beyond it? Yes, of course, absolutely, says the Shruti. What do I have to do to see what is beyond it? Multiply this into 100. And that becomes one measure of the happiness of the lower rung celestials. Not even the higher rung like Indra and all that. No, they are far away. Lower rung celestials like Ajana Devatas, and they are a certain kind of, celestial servants. And then celestial butlers called Karma Devas. Yeah. They just bring coffee to the other celestials. They enjoy 10,000, 100,000 times this human happiness. Then 100,000 times multiplied this lower rung celestial, servant's happiness. It becomes the happiness of the medium rung celestials, like the Pitrus. Who are the Pitrus? The ancestors, the mains. They are enjoying more than these lower rung celestials. And what are the lower rung celestials doing? They are just serving the middle range celestials. Then you multiply that again into 10 and into 10 and into 10, and then you find several times removed, several tens of 1,000 times removed from this chota happiness belonging to what looked like the perfect son-in-law material is enjoyed by Brahmaji, who is seen as the creator of the universe. This is the whole range of happiness from what? From the so-called little fellow Now he looks little, just like when you see the NASA photos. First you see the photo of the earth, oh nice. Then you see the solar system, the earth is a little small little ball. And then you see the whole Milky Way galaxy, the earth is not even a pixel. And then you see Andromeda next to Milky Way, the sun is not even a pixel, and so on and so on. So like this, as the measure of joy increases, the original measure that we set up has disappeared into the non-pixel mode. Yeah, it has become so small that it is not even in the situation, not even in the works. But then here's the secret. Alongside these whole levels and layers of happinesses, these elaborately constructed measures of happinesses, there is one fellow who is quietly enjoying all the measures without being either rich or young or strong or well educated, nothing. Without doing all that, or without being a lower rung, mid-range or higher level celestial, he or she is enjoying everything just sitting under a tree. Who is that? Shrotriyasya cha kamahatasya. This is the refrain. Yeah. And the refrain is repeatedly said. This is the chorus in that particular segment. This is the refrain. Shrotriya means the one who has studied self-knowledge through proper teachings. Akama hataha. You have to resolve the compound properly. You cannot say akamena hataha, killed by non-desire, no. In whom all the desires are gone. Yeah. Na kamena hataha. The one who is not hijacked by desire is enjoying all these levels and the range and this brilliantly set up continuum of happiness. This person is enjoying that. How? How come? What does it take? We will see that in the next class tomorrow. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Any questions? That was fun.
Did you hear
Yeah.
Shankar from Sydney is greeting you?
Oh, Namaste Shankar from Sydney. What time is it there? What time is it there? Namaste. Om. You had a question?
Yeah.
What was your question?
In Vedanta or Sanskrit, is there a word for a subconscious mind, or is it all?
Kashaya.
Kashaya.
Unconscious.
Okay.
Yeah. Kashaya. Yeah, it's very lovely. Good. I'm glad you like it.
It's the same model applied here where coconut bliss is Ananda, but Ananda is not coconut bliss, as we use to discuss Nithyananda.
In a way. Yeah. We can say coconut bliss is a small measure of Ananda. And of course Ananda being limitless is not coconut bliss, but it's not outside of the realm of coconut bliss either.
was hearing that sense of a part or a small part, which seems to possibly create the same kind of confusion that the Gaudiya Vaishnavas have with the.
So that's why we have the
Jiva
whole
part
chapter
also.
to resolve that confusion. Yeah. Matram eva upajivati. This is the Shruti Vakya. We'll see that in verse 2 tomorrow. Matram eva upajivati means they just live a small part of that Ananda, meaning we don't have to take it as, because the Ananda is indivisible, you don't have to take it as part in that sense, but you have to take it as part in the sense of you part with it quickly. That's what is the meaning of the word part. Yeah.
As the mind wanders and attention.
You wait and see. You wait and see. Verse 3 and 4 will tell you. Yeah. Verse come to verse, we'll have it either tomorrow or day after. Yeah, because of the various states of the mind. It's all this is various states of the mind reflect, determine the measure of joy. So, and also Swami Vidyaranya gives tips how to keep the mind always in a good, conducive state. Yeah, we will be studying all that. This is going to be a very nice chapter. Oh.